Hi everyone, this is Nikki and welcome back to the Fundamentals of Print Design. In this lesson, we are going to discuss what it takes to create a document in InDesign. So this is just going to be a basic overview that will guide you through how to create a document for any of your print projects. So when you open up InDesign, this is what you're going to more than likely see. Again, if you checked don't show this again, then you are going to see this. So you would go into create a new document up here, and that shows up for you. So new document, there's a lot of features in here to think about, and you really have to have an idea of what your document is at this point, how it's going to be printed, and what's involved in your document from this stage. You can always go back and adjust these settings, but that is going to just add more work if you have to go through a drastic file size change because you didn't know what your settings should be from the beginning. So I'm going to go through all of these settings available to you and then give you some tips along the way. The first thing here is your document preset. This is actually something that is either default or it can be a custom preset, which means that once you go through these settings, you can save those and apply them to any project in the future, which is very handy if you have documents that you find that you're continually making over and over again. You can save those settings and then you don't have to remember them from time to time. So then from there you will set your number of pages. InDesign is fantastic in regards to publications. That's actually what it is used for, is creating publications, mostly with multiple pages. However, InDesign is also just as good with single page documents like flyers and posters. So don't think that you have to have a multi-page document to use InDesign, but know that you can set that here. One thing to note about page numbers: depending on your project, you may be creating a document that is unrelated. For example, you may have pages that you just want to keep in one InDesign document, but not necessarily print together and have bound together like you would a book or a magazine. And that is fine. And if that's the case, you can set as many pages as you need and just uncheck facing pages. And then you can create a document that has pages that are unrelated to each other. But if you are creating a document that is a book or a publication, something that is meant to be stapled together or bound in a certain way where the pages are related to each other, you're going to want to keep facing pages checked, and you're going to want to set a page number that is of even numbers. And what this means is whenever you're working with publications, you're working with even numbers. You have your front and your back cover, and then you have your inside pages from there. And when a publication is printed, it's normally 2 pages on the front of a piece of paper and then 2 pages on the back of that piece of paper. So that's actually 4 physical pages in InDesign and 2 spreads. So you will always have an even number of pages, but you may have an odd or even number of spreads depending on how many of those pages you actually need. But it's always important that you have a quantity that is divisible by 4, and it can be as many pages as you need to, but you're usually set into what printers call page signatures based on a number divisible by 4, because that is how printing works. You always have at least 4 pages. And most printers will work in signatures of 4 or 8. So just keep that in mind. I know that I deal with that in magazine production, where if I'm creating a small magazine that's 24 pages, I can't just go, oh, I need an extra page and add that to 25. You know, you need to go at least 4 more pages than that. So I need to at least go to 28. But my printer typically will go from 24 to 32. So that is going to be a discussion that you make with the printer that you're using, because they all tend to have different ideas about how many pages are in a signature and how they want that to work. So that is specific to publications, so we'll leave that for now, and then you can set your page size. Here's some defaults. Your letter, your tabloid is an 11 by 17. That is a standard poster size that you may be using. It also works for, the reason it's called tabloid is magazines, that's a standard size that is used for publications. And then there's other settings in here as well, and you can always have custom page sizes depending on your project. And then of course you can change your orientation from portrait to landscape depending on what you require. I'm going to go ahead and set 6 columns in here just to give you an idea of what that looks like as far as layout help that will provide by adding columns to your document. Margins are helpful. That's going to be the perimeter that you have to work with. I always like to keep content within my margins, so a 1/2 inch from the outside all the way around is a good place to start. That will change, of course, depending on the overall size of your document. Larger documents like signage may require a bigger margin to accommodate that extra size. Same thing for bleed. Now, the tips on bleeds is that I almost always, 100% of the time, set a bleed for my document because it's always better to have a bleed and not need it than to go back later and realize that you needed to set a bleed. So I will almost always by default set this, even if I'm not 100% sure I'm going to need it, because it's easier to work away from a bleed than to have to add it in after the fact. And by default, you are working with a bleed of 1/8 of an inch on all sides. And if you hit tab with the link checked over here, highlighted, it will apply that to all 4 corners, all 4 sides rather, of your document, which is very important. You want to have the same bleed on all sides. 1/8 of an inch is a good place to start, but again, depending on your document size, this may be bigger. Seldom is it smaller than that, but it may be bigger if your printer requires a little bit more space to trim away. And the easy way to remember what a bleed is that's that area that your document extends to, so you have some extra space to trim away if needed in your final print. And if you go look at any print item, whether it's a postcard or a magazine or a flyer, most all of those have graphics that go all the way to the edge and they were trimmed, and that's where the bleed comes in. So when you're done here, you can hit Save Preset, give it a name, and hit OK, and it will show up under your document preset for future use if you want to. And when you're ready, you hit OK, and your new document appears ready to be worked on. And you'll see the 6 columns here, and you can see how handy that is for layout, that I have these columns to work in. Works great for a grid. In the publication, you can line up your text very nicely using this. This is your margin right here, this white space, where important items like text should not fall. It should never go into this white space. It should stay inside in this pink area. That's where your important content goes. Anything that you don't mind being trimmed away will be between this red and this black line. This is the bleed that we set, so it extends beyond our document size because it will be trimmed down to our final 8.5 by 11 is the idea. And again, you don't want anything important in here. You do want your graphics to extend beyond to be trimmed away, but you do not want anything important like text to fall anywhere in this margin. Because if you do, you run the risk of it being trimmed away by accident during the bleeding process when people trim the bleed. Now, printers can be pretty accurate, but at the same time, we give them enough space from the edge to ensure that they're okay, even if they're a little bit off in their final cut. So that is how you create a document in InDesign. So now that you have a document ready to go, it is time to set up your grids and your guides. We already have our columns here and our margins set, which is a great place to start. The next step is to set some guides for your document and your items that you're going to add into that document to help you along with that final design. Thanks for watching.